Hi everyone, so I just wanted to do a little Renee rants video regarding some issues I had whilst reading The Hunger Games, which I read finally after 3 years of avoiding it and leaving it on my shelf. So I'm reading this series now at last. And whilst reading the first book, there were some things I really took issue with and that frustrated and upset me and whatnot, and maybe it was purposeful, and maybe it was all like narrative devices of Suzanne Collins. I'm not questioning her writing. I'll do a separate video review. Yes, okay. Things I took issue with. Violence. I don't stomach violence well in art forms. I do not question it being used if it's not a matter of censorship, and please don't mistake me here. It's just a personal taste thing. I don't cope well with it. I'm too sensitive and I take things too seriously and whatnot. So, the violence in the book, for me, was quite graphic and brutal, so it was hard to stomach, and it was hard to take in the context of what was happening within the games, how people were responding to the violence, especially in terms of whether or not it happened to good characters or bad characters or just background characters, and how it was utilised. I questioned it a lot of the time because it felt like when the really vicious things happened to quote-unquote bad people, you were meant to be cheering them on. Like, that's another issue to do with Katniss's narration and her narrative voice and her internal monologues sometimes. But I just sometimes was a little bit worried as to whether or not there was some kind of underlying message there about, you know, good and bad and just desserts and getting what you deserve and all that kind of thing, and it really put an off taste in my mouth at times. Especially Cato's death at the end. Oddly enough, I cried when Cato died. Not necessarily out of pity for the guy, because no, he was not a nice person, but that death was incredibly, incredibly harsh. And the fact that it was so, like, just the little details of what couldn't really upset me, especially in writing. And, like, it being mentioned how long he was moaning in pain for while getting eaten by dogs over the course of hours. And then it took Katniss that long to realise, well, maybe I should probably shoot the poor guy and put him out of his misery. Yeah, maybe. Maybe you should have done that, you know, 5 hours ago. But I just... okay, yeah, I cried when that happened. Did anyone else cry then, or am I just messed up? Anyway, yes, and the violence, it was an effective tool, certainly, but it really upset me. And it leads me to all the wider questions and frustrations I had with the characters and the society of Panem as a whole. I realise it's a dystopian setting, and so you have to take into account the fact that you know, the negative aspects have to be heightened. That's the point of dystopian as a genre, really. And typically speaking, you have a oppressed society, which you certainly do in this case, and that should lead to answers regarding why no one was rebelling and why no one was questioning and actively protesting and trying to stop the insanity that is the games. People keep telling me, Renee, stop complaining about that. Rebellion comes later in the series in books 2 and 3. But that wasn't my issue. My issue was the fact that I was trying to get through this book without tearing the pages out in emotional turmoil because no one was rebelling and trying to stop this from happening. And, you know how you sometimes just really need a counterpart in a book, you know, someone who's voicing your opinions, even if it's just for a moment, like a minor character, someone saying or doing or feeling something that you can relate to and empathize with. Especially in dystopians because, you know, everything is usually so extreme and so very, very bad. And sometimes you just need that. It's like, it's a soothing thing to see, and it did not happen once in this book. And it was such a struggle for me, emotionally and morally, to comprehend what was going on in this book. I couldn't just accept it because that passiveness felt like that was all I was getting from everybody, including the tributes, including Peter, including Katniss. Yes, Katniss was actively saving her sister from having to partake in these games, but she was still participating, and I know it's like they have no other option. They're stripped of their freedom and they're stripped of choices. But even once in the games, the fact that no one, I don't know, tried to commit suicide or buck the system earlier. I know that suicide apparently was taken out as an option, but that was only referenced once. And then, of course, later on you get the fact that, you know, rebelling against the Capitol is a really bad idea. Well, yeah, so is going in there and getting killed. and having to kill other people. Like, you wouldn't want... I would so opt for standing there, grabbing something sharp, and just killing myself right away, so that I wouldn't have to face the prospect of killing someone else or getting killed by someone I don't even know, who's my age or younger. It's just... it was... I don't know, I was just... I realise that everything I'm saying probably has an immediate answer from people watching the video, but it's just... I struggled so much, and I was so upset and angry throughout the book, and I just... I mean, yes, that's a measure of how effective it was, and it's not a criticism of how it's written, or even the content. It's just how I was responding, and I certainly didn't enjoy it. It just really... the whole experience was tainted for me. I was just so depressed while reading this book. And I had a really hard time at times to connect with Katniss as a protagonist. I didn't dislike her necessarily, but sometimes her narration was so cold and callous. Like, she says, there's a line in here where she says that her hatred of the Capitol hasn't lessened her hatred of her fellow tributes. And I'm like, really? That's unprecedented. Why do you hate them? You're all in the same boat. There's no moral high ground here necessarily, because you're all being thrown into this situation that you can't control, and suddenly you hate them for being forced into the same thing you're forced into. That every now and then it made me question what the message was meant to be regarding bravery and strength versus weakness and seeming self-interest, and I had problems with it, and I was upset, and I don't know how I'm going to cope trying to sit through the film adaptation, because of course if they are true to the source material, then the violence should at least be depicted in some level on screen, and that will be tough for me. I don't know. I know that people love this series, and I am going to see it through, because it is quite addictive reading in its own disgusting way, but it's certainly not enjoyable for me, and I was just wondering how other people feel. I just needed to get a few things off my chest. Haven't worded them well. I'm trying to hurry, so I'm going to go now, but yeah, let me know what you think. And I'm halfway through Catching Fire, so we'll see if I keep getting really, really gloomy and mad. Yeah.